The Louisiana swamps are silent at dawn, mist curling like secrets over the water. Amidst the murky shadows, Pickle Wheat, the man the cameras captured wrestling alligators, navigating treacherous bayous, and living a life that seemed untouchable, vanishes from the world he once ruled. Friends whisper of betrayal, enemies of obsession, but no one knows the truth. How does a man who seemed so indestructible, whose every day was a testament to grit and fearlessness, find himself swallowed by shadows? What hidden battles drove him to the edge, unseen by the millions who cheered his triumphs on screen? This is a story of power and fragility, of fame and isolation, where the line between survival and self-destruction is thinner than the reeds along the swamp's edge. And in the silence of those waters, one question lingers. What truly happened to Pickle Wheat? The Louisiana swamp wakes slowly, as if the world itself hesitates before breathing. Mist clings to the water's surface, curling in languid spirals around gnarled cypress knees and tangled reeds, hiding secrets that only the swamp has witnessed. The sound of dripping water echoes softly, mingling with the distant cries of egrets and the faint slap of fish breaking the surface. It is in this murky, merciless world that Pickle Wheat was forged, a boy shaped not by comfort or protection, but by the raw, unyielding rhythm of survival. Pickle's early days were marked by absence. Parents preoccupied, community tight-lipped, a world that demanded toughness before kindness. He learned the swamp as instinct, feeling the subtle shifts in wind, the whisper of predators beneath the water, the weight of silence that precedes danger. Every encounter with snapping turtles, hidden snakes, or gliding alligators became a test, each small triumph a declaration that he could endure what others could not. Yet behind his fearless eyes, there lay a quiet fracture. The awareness that mastery over the swamp could not fill the emptiness left by neglect, by the absence of guidance or affection. Cameras would later capture his daring feats, the moments of gripping tension as he wrestled alligators, scaled moss-laden banks, and navigated unseen currents. But they could never capture the tremor beneath his hands, the pulse of doubt that coiled in his chest each time he faced the water. The swamp was both protector and oppressor, a cradle and a crucible, demanding excellence while offering no comfort, teaching resilience alongside solitude. At night, the oppressive humidity pressed against him, and the cries of unseen creatures reminded him of the isolation woven into the very fabric of his life. Pickle moved with a practiced ease that belied the trauma etched into his muscles and nerves. He became a local legend, the boy who could face any challenge the bayou presented. Yet even as he garnered respect, there was a subtle tension in his movements, a hesitation, a shadow flickering across his gaze. The boy who conquered water snakes and alligators still carried the silent scars of battles that no audience could see. By the time the lights of reality television reached his swamp, Pickle had learned to perform courage as though it were instinct. The world would see him as invincible, fearless, untouchable. But the cameras would not see the nights spent staring into the black water, questioning whether survival was enough, or whether something vital was slipping, slowly, from his grasp. And in that quiet moment, when the mist hung thick and the swamp whispered of hidden dangers, the first hints of a storm gathered, not in the clouds above, but inside the heart of Pickle Wheat. The audience, unaware, would not yet know how close that inner tempest had begun to swirl. The glow of television lights cut through the darkness of the swamp like a blade, illuminating Pickle Wheat in ways the moon never could. Suddenly, the quiet isolation that had been both sanctuary and prison was replaced by lenses and microphones, the constant hum of production crews, and the invisible pressure of an audience hungry for spectacle. He moved through this new world with the same practiced ease he had honed over years in the bayou, but now the stakes were magnified. Every alligator wrestled, every treacherous crossing, every grueling day under the blazing Louisiana sun was no longer just survival, it was performance. And performances, no matter how convincing, demand a price. Behind the camera, away from the roaring applause and cheering crowds, Pickle wrestled with the weight of expectation. Fame was a strange predator, one that gnawed at his resolve quietly, without warning. Relationships frayed under the strain. Friends who had known him since childhood watched as he drifted, replaced by producers and co-stars who saw him as a brand rather than a person. Trust became a fragile currency, exchanged sparingly, guarded jealously, and the swamp, once a place of solitary refuge, now felt like a stage with invisible walls closing in. Each morning began before dawn. Pickle would rise to the sounds of water dripping from moss-laden branches, the distant calls of birds, and the low, constant hum of insects. He moved through the mist as he always had, alert, deliberate, but now every motion was scrutinized, every stumble or hesitation potentially immortalized on screen. He learned to hide the subtle tremors in his hands, the moments when doubt or fear crept in, knowing that to falter in front of the camera was to expose a weakness the world was eager to exploit. And yet, beneath the armor of fame, the internal wounds remained. Memories of abandonment, of nights spent alone in the humid darkness, haunted him more persistently as the cameras rolled. The applause and recognition could not mask the gnawing emptiness that lingered in the spaces where connection should have been. Pickle's courage became a mask, a veneer that allowed him to meet the expectations of millions while hiding a fragility that few could perceive. Small betrayals, whispered behind the scenes, began to puncture the illusion. Alliances with co-stars shifted, loyalty proved conditional, and even his most trusted confidants revealed hidden motives. Every interaction, every smile exchanged under bright lights, carried a weight that only he felt, a reminder that the swamp had not taught him how to navigate the treacherous currents of human ambition. By the time the season reached its midpoint, Pickle stood at the apex of his fame, admired, envied, and feared. But he was also on the precipice of something darker. The very traits that had made him a hero in the eyes of the public, the fearlessness, the relentless drive, the mastery of danger, also isolated him, leaving him vulnerable in ways the cameras could never reveal. One small incident, almost imperceptible to outsiders, a word misplaced, a glance misread, foreshadowed the unraveling to come. In the dense, humid air of the swamp, beneath the glare of studio lights, Pickle Wheat's carefully constructed world trembled on the edge of collapse, and no one watching could yet know how close he was to the breaking point. By the time Pickle Wheat reached the pinnacle of his fame, the swamp had transformed from a silent teacher into a roaring theater, illuminated not only by the sun but by the bright glare of cameras and the unblinking gaze of millions. Every stunt, every confrontation with the murky waters, every grasping of an alligator's jaw was no longer just survival. It was a performance of mythic proportions. Fans cheered from their couches, unaware of the silent storm brewing behind his steady, fearless gaze. What appeared as confidence on screen was often a mask, hiding a turbulence as relentless and treacherous as the bayou currents he had mastered as a child. The apex was intoxicating. Merchandise flew off shelves. Social media buzzed with admiration. Strangers on the street whispered his name. He was celebrated as invincible, untouchable, the embodiment of courage and grit. And yet, the closer the audience came to idolizing him, the more isolated he felt from reality. Fame did not fill the hollows of memory. The nights spent alone listening to the swamp's whispers. It did not soothe the residual pain of abandonment, nor did it ease the relentless pressure of constant performance. Each accolade, each moment of applause, was a reminder that he was performing a life, not living it. Inside the swamp, the familiar rhythm of water and wildlife became almost suffocating. Every sound, the slap of water against a canoe, the rustle of reeds, the distant cry of a heron, was amplified by the tension in Pickle's mind. Every glance from a co-star, every shift in tone from a producer, carried weight. Friendships once solid now felt like fragile rafts adrift in storm-tossed waters. Alliances were fleeting, loyalty conditional, and betrayal hid in the unspoken words of those around him. Pickle learned to navigate these new, human currents with the same precision he had used to read the bayou, yet the toll on his psyche was immense. One incident, minor to the untrained eye, signaled the fragility beneath his bravado. During a routine alligator capture, a sudden misstep, a rope slipped, a camera crew mispositioned, turned a familiar scene into chaos. Pickle's heart pounded, not from the physical danger, but from the creeping realization that one miscalculation, one exposure, could shatter the carefully maintained persona he had built. His mind raced with questions no fan could see. Was he still in control? Could he trust those around him? Would the world remember him for bravery or for the moment he faltered? Yet the most dangerous currents were internal. Pickle's mind churned with guilt, fear, and the unrelenting pressure to succeed. The isolation he had always known as a boy was magnified, now amplified by fame's cruel paradox. Visibility without intimacy. Adoration surrounded him, yet he was profoundly alone. In quiet moments, when the cameras paused and the swamp fell silent, he felt the weight of every unspoken word, every unhealed wound. Courage became a double-edged sword, exposing him to admiration while leaving him naked to emotional turbulence. As a storm gathered over the horizon, dark clouds mirrored the tempest inside him. The swamp, once a kingdom, now felt like a crucible pressuring, testing, threatening to consume the man it had forged. And in the tension of that moment, as lightning split the sky and the wind tore at moss-laden branches, Pickle faced the edge of his own limits, unarmed against the emotional torrents he could no longer conceal. The apex of his life, the height of glory, was also the brink of personal collapse. A moment poised on the razor's edge between triumph and tragedy, waiting for the first spark that would ignite the darkness beneath. The applause faded, the cameras retreated, the lights dimmed, and for Pickle, the swamp, once his crucible, once his kingdom, became a mirror of solitude and fear. Fame had carried him to unimaginable heights, but its departure left him exposed, adrift in waters that now seemed deeper, darker, and more unrelenting than ever before. The bayou, with all its beauty and peril, reflected the storm inside him, a turbulence fueled by guilt, regret, and the haunting echoes of every choice he had made. Isolation weighed on him like the humid Louisiana air pressing against his chest. Friends, once present and steadfast, had slipped away under the pressures of envy and ambition. Co-stars and colleagues, drawn to the lights and fame, proved as ephemeral as the morning mist. Pickle found himself confronting a reality that no alligator, no treacherous current, no stunt could prepare him for. The swamp now felt like a judge, and he was the accused. Every sound, the croak of a bullfrog, the snap of a twig, seemed magnified, each a whisper reminding him of failures he could not undo. Internally, Pickle wrestled with guilt and fear that had no outlet. Nights were the hardest. The darkness pressed close, swallowing the familiar outlines of trees and water, leaving him to confront the absence of connection, the memories of abandonment, the subtle betrayals of those he once trusted. Even the bayou, his lifelong companion and teacher, offered no solace. The waters, once a reflection of mastery and resilience, now became a mirror of despair. In the quiet, he could hear the echo of every mistake, every missed opportunity, every fracture in the fragile structures of loyalty and love that had once surrounded him. A single event catalyzed the collapse. It could have been an accident, a misjudged crossing, a tumble into a hidden channel, or a betrayal whispered and unseen from someone closest. Whatever the spark, it ignited a chain reaction. The man who had mastered the swamp now struggled to master himself. Panic, regret, and anger swirled in a storm as relentless as any hurricane that had passed over Louisiana. Pickle's body moved with skill, but his mind faltered, a dangerous combination in a place where nature rewarded precision and punished hesitation. In this chapter of his life, bravery was no longer enough. The applause of fans, the accolades, the fame, it all vanished into the dark waters, leaving him with only the weight of his choices. He had faced death on countless occasions, yet he now confronted a different, more insidious threat: the slow erosion of identity, the creeping isolation that left him vulnerable to despair. The swamp became both refuge and prison, a space where memories of childhood struggles and adult triumphs collided in a relentless tidal wave of self-doubt. And as he sat on the edge of a quiet channel, mist rising around him like ghostly fingers, Pickle realized the most dangerous currents were not in the water, but inside himself. One small misstep, one unguarded moment, could undo everything he had fought for. The night deepened, the water rippled, and in the shadows of the cypress trees, it became clear that the man who had conquered the bayou might now be swallowed by it, body and soul, leaving the audience to wonder if he could ever find the strength to rise again. The swamp no longer demanded anything from Pickle Wheat. The cameras had left, the crowds had faded, and the bright glare of fame had dimmed into memory. Yet the bayou remained, silent and eternal, a mirror reflecting both the man he had been and the man he might still become. In this quiet, Pickle confronted the weight of his own life, the choices, the triumphs, the betrayals, and the hidden wounds that had shaped him. The mist curled around gnarled cypress trees, the water lapped gently at moss-laden banks, and in the hush of the swamp, he began to reckon with the currents of his own heart. Time had altered him. The once relentless hunter moved with a slower, more deliberate grace. His hands, scarred and weathered from years of gripping rope, scales, and reeds, now carried the subtle tremor of someone who had glimpsed the fragility beneath courage. Friends who had survived the tides of fame cautiously returned, tentative bridges forming in the quiet aftermath of conflict. He spoke less, but when he did, there was a gravity in his voice, a resonance that spoke of a man learning to balance strength with vulnerability, fear with acceptance. Pickle reflected on the years of performance, the applause that once seemed essential, and realized that true mastery was no longer measured in feats of daring or survival. It was measured in understanding himself, in confronting the darkness he had carried since boyhood, and in reconnecting with the swamp not as a stage, but as a home. The same waters that had tested him now offered perspective. The bayou's silence became a kind of teacher again, whispering lessons in patience, humility, and the quiet resilience of life. Yet redemption was neither sudden nor complete. Memories lingered, shadows of past mistakes cast long and unrelenting. The nights remained the hardest, the darkness a reminder of how easily isolation could creep back. Pickle knew that the man the cameras had captured was only a fragment of the whole. Fame had been a distorted mirror, showing courage without vulnerability, bravery without the hidden wounds that made him human. In the quiet of the swamp, he allowed himself to face those shadows, to understand the interplay of fear and desire, loss and love, that had guided every step of his life. The chapter closes not with resolution, but with a question that hovers over the water like mist. The swamp endures, eternal and indifferent, and Pickle Wheat, changed yet unbroken, continues to navigate its tides. What remains unseen, what mysteries, struggles, and quiet triumphs, lies just beneath the surface. A reminder that life is never truly complete, that survival and meaning are inseparable from the shadows we carry. As the sun rises, painting the bayou in shades of gold and amber, Pickle steps forward, a man reborn yet forever tethered to the waters that shaped him, leaving viewers with the haunting awareness that his story, like the swamp, flows onward, unpredictable, relentless, and profoundly human.